Greetings, this is Ron Smalek, and I'm reading Mockingjay, which is the third book in the Hunger Games series by Suzanne Collins. What follows are my thoughts chapter by chapter. So I don't have a ton to say about chapter 17. Basically, Katniss is, now that the districts are united, she's not going to be allowed to go to the capital to fight. With her injuries, they say she hasn't been fit, she hasn't been going to training, etc. Johanna also is deemed as not able to fight, and so the two of them sort of bond together and at least become allies, if not friends, and start training together and basically focus all their time and energy into training in the hopes that if they train hard enough, they will actually be allowed into the army to go and fight the capital. And at the end of this chapter, we see all of our favorite characters sitting down in the cafeteria having lunch together, and Peeta shows up. He seems to be a little bit better, but he's still not quite acting normal, and it makes everybody uncomfortable, and some words are exchanged, and then the group splits up. So no real cliffhanger at the end of chapter 17. All right, then we have chapter 18. Um, so Katniss and Johanna have been training quite heavily, and at one point they're sort of moved up in the ranks of training, and they look across the lawn and they see Peeta is starting to do his basic training as well, and this is really bothering Katniss that they're allowing him to have a gun when he's obviously been sent back to assassinate her. I thought this was a clever little piece here. They say that they start to learn the rhythms of their condition when every time they get a haircut, that basically means that they're going to be filming something soon during the training. And Katniss gets assigned to Squad 451, which I think must be a reference to Fahrenheit 451, another famous book, which I think has some parallels to this section of the Hunger Games. Um, they decide that they are going to send this special secret squad 451, into an area where the Peacekeeper barracks are. It's a relatively um, fighting free zone, but the area is strewn with these deadly pods, and each pod has like a random um, booby trap in it, either gunfire or nets or things like that. And as Katniss and Finnick are looking at the map of this area, they're heavily reminded of a game, of the Hunger Games, and they feel like, this whole area has basically been put together to remind them of the Hunger Games and sort of throw them off their game, which is kind of interesting. The last part of their training is to go into something called the Block on a solo mission, which is basically designed to test your greatest weakness. Of course, Katniss succeeds to overcome hers, but apparently Joanna panics while she's in the block, and we find out that while she was, imprisoned in the capital, they would use water torture and electric shock torture to keep her under control and to um, torture her. At one point, we also hear that she was in the cell next to Peeta, and she says that she could hear his screams while he was being tortured. So Katniss kind of feels for her. We've seen her demonstrate that she has nothing at all. When she was rescued from the capital, she had nothing but the clothes on her back, which were government issued. And so Katniss goes out into the woods and bundles up sort of a sprig of pine needles and brings it back to her so she can smell it, and it reminds her of home. And it's the first thing she's really been given as, something that she can own. And so Katniss and Johanna have a discussion, and Katniss promises Joanna, I thought this was really interesting, that Joanna can be the one to kill President Snow. And at this point, I think the alarm bell was kind of going off in my head before now, but I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute. The next part of this book is called Assassin. Peeta's being set up as the likely assassin, but obviously it's not going to go down that road. Johanna, I think, might have gotten brainwashed while she was in the capital and is an assassin who we're going to find her turning on Katniss, and perhaps Peeta's going to save Katniss in the next part of this book, which will start in chapter 19. Before we get there, um, this is where Katniss begins hatching a plan in her mind of stealing the holographic map from Boggs. Boggs is the team leader, and deserting, basically leaving the team and going off on her own on a special mission to kill President Snow. Of course, this sort of plan gets interrupted, as it always does, and this time it's because Peeta appears, and now Peeta has completed his basic training and is going to join Team 451. So that's going to turn out interesting.